Live from the Under Construction Stripper News headquarters in the Champagne Room, here's my interview with Cory Doctorow.
Cory, are you ready to talk? Okay.
When our policymakers made decisions that we told them would make companies benefit from being bad instead of good, that these companies went ahead and they were bad instead of good, and they made a lot of money doing it. And that's how we end up here in this moment that I call the Enshittification, the moment where everything is turning into shit.
Hi, I'm Andrea with Stripper News. It's been 2 years since Meta banned Canadian news off Facebook and Instagram. In the midst of this information dearth on Canadian social media, our American neighbors to the south have continued their threats to make us their 51st state.
Hopefully we'll be fine with Canada. I love Canada. Frankly, Canada should be the 51st state, okay? It really should, because Canada relies entirely on the United States. We don't rely on Canada.
When American companies remove our ability as Canadians to access our own news on their popular social platforms, does it have an impact on our democracy and on our sovereignty? And how does it impact sex workers? Today we're talking to Cory Doctorow about his latest book, Enshittification: Why Everything Suddenly Got Worse and What to Do About It. Cory Doctorow is a science fiction author, a journalist, and an activist. You can find him at craphound.com. Well, first things first, what is Enshittification and why is it happening right now?
Sure. So I should say, hi, I'm Cory Doctorow. I work for a nonprofit called the Electronic Frontier Foundation. It's a digital rights group. We've been around for about 35 years, and I've been there for about 25 years. And over that career, the job of getting people to care about these very technical and abstract things before they're not technical or abstract because everything is collapsing around them has been a job of coming up with, metaphors and similes and framing devices and parables, and then the occasional funny word. And that's what Enshittification is. It's one of these funny words. And I think there's something magic about the combination of a minor license to vulgarity and, I flatter myself, a pretty good technical, economic, and political analysis of what's going on. So the thesis has got 3 parts. One is a descriptive component that describes how platforms are going bad. One is a theoretical or explanatory component about why they're going bad. And one is a prescriptive component about what we should do about the fact that we're going bad.
Stripper News.
Stripper News.
Stripper News.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. The algorithm don't like these girlies, right? So you got to support. You got to like, got to subscribe. If you're on Instagram, y'all better be commenting. Y'all better be sharing. Y'all better be saving. Keep Stripper News alive.
Stripper News.
And so the core descriptive element is pretty straightforward, that platforms go bad in 3 stages. In stage 1, you have platforms that are good to their end users, and they're finding a way to lock those users in. Once they have locked those users in, they move on to stage 2. They make things materially worse for those users, which they can do because they're locked in and they won't depart readily. And they do so in service to making things good for business customers who also come in and become dependent on those locked in users. And in stage 3, those business customers are also targeted by the platform, also have the value siphoned off from them. All the value is taken away except for a kind of minimal, homeopathic residue. That's just all that's needed to keep users locked to the platform, businesses locked to the users, and everything else is harvested for management and shareholders. So that's what's happening. But, we didn't invent greed in the middle of the last decade, so something changed. And my thesis is that platforms, like other businesses, they would prefer to take as much for themselves as they can, to pay as little as possible for their inputs, to charge as much as possible for their outputs. In an ideal world, if you were running a business, you would charge infinity for your outputs and you pay nothing for your inputs. And that, I know that is like how academic publishers do business, but most other businesses have to accept some kind of limits on this. And those limits are imposed by what economists would call disciplinary forces, right? And so those disciplinary forces, they're things like competition, right? The fear that your customers or your suppliers or your workers might go somewhere else, right? It's regulation, the fear that the government might smack you around if you harm people. It's worker power, right? So historically, tech workers were super powerful. They weren't unionized, but they got power from scarcity. And when you have workers that are extremely valuable and hard to replace, then a lot of the times what they say goes, right? Your boss orders you to enshittify that thing that you missed your mother's funeral to ship on time, and you're like, nope. And you can't make me because the guy across the street will give me a job by this afternoon, and you can't hire anyone to do my job. And then in tech, we've had a unique and I think very exciting form of discipline for some values of exciting. I know I get excited about weird things, but the exciting form of discipline here is something that computer scientists call interoperability, which is just the power to make one thing work with something else. You know, anyone's light bulb goes in your light sockets. But with digital technology, you get interoperability on steroids. From a computer science perspective, there's only one kind of computer we know how to make. Formally, we call it a Turing-complete universal von Neumann machine. But practically, it just means that it's an engine that can calculate everything that can be validly calculated, which means that if there's a program in a digital device you use that's doing something that you don't like, someone can give you another program that neutralizes that program. If your printer won't take third-party ink because it's got a program that checks to see whether the cartridge came from HP, another program can turn that program off. And so these sources of discipline, they took these companies that were run by visibly terrible people. And they made those companies do good things that we liked. Not because they were better people, but because they were afraid of the consequences. And over 25 years, we deconstructed all the sources of discipline, and it had the absolutely predictable and foreseeable effect that when our policymakers made decisions that we told them would make companies benefit from being bad instead of good, that these companies went ahead and they were bad instead of good, and they made a lot of money doing it. And that's how we end up here in this moment that I call the Enshittification, the moment where everything is turning into shit.
Brr, it's gonna be so cold in 2026.
Trying to get over my
You're gonna have to get a stripper new sweater to keep you warm. Nothing says that you love your friends and your wife than buying stripper news merch for them. We have t-shirts. We got all sorts of, this actually is really cute and really underrated.
I want to get back to that idea about policy essentially enabling the bad behavior of these companies. I mean, you're a Canadian. You're in fact a Torontonian by birth.
Like all the best Americans.
Exactly.
Are you also a Torontonian?
We are. Stripper News is based in
Oh,
Toronto.
really?
Yeah.
Oh, are you, I know this is a tangent, but I know that originally the company that became MindGeek was headquartered in the carpet factory. Are you connected to that? I know there's been like a succession of media businesses related to sex work sort of down there. Is that where you are?
We are not connected to MindGeek in any.
No, I know. I'm not saying you are, but there was like this ecosystem of businesses. So I used to live down next to the carpet factory.
Oh, okay.
And I had an office there. And I was a smoker then. And I would go out for smokes and be hanging out with like early cam girls and people who were making the web servers work and all of that stuff. So is this connected, or just a coincidence that it's not part of that ecosystem of like sex and tech businesses that kind of grew up around the carpet factory?
It's not quite connected, but I can imagine that there are seedlings and little wildflowers
There's probably a
that
lineage.
arise. Yes.
Someone involved was involved with someone who was involved with it. I'm sure. Yeah.
I mean, this is a sex worker run initiative first and foremost.
Yeah, of
and then
course.
the tech kind of comes after, but yeah. I mean, it's Toronto. That's definitely at least the first landing.
Right.
Excuse me, there are no men around here at Stripper News headquarters.
No, we are not affiliated with no MindGeek or any other tech institutions. There are literally no men around here.
Absolutely none.
It's pussy only, babes, and it has been from the beginning.
But daddies can support all they want by clicking the QR code.
By tipping us, you can tip
right.
us, link it below or here. And if you are a big tech investor and you want to invest in Stripper News and you want to see us become the biggest media and biggest news platform, then you're more than welcome to reach out to us.
Love ya.
But, and you also, I'm just assuming that like people who are involved in the web early on probably had a lot of technical proclivity, right? Like I think there's a story that sex workers and other groups of people are like themselves like highly technologically adventurous. And that's why, you know, the first people to use the VCR and the first people to use 8mm film and so on. And I think it's more true that just like every group has got people who are technologically adventurous, but the only way you can get your friends to listen to you when you're like, you should try this cool new thing, is if the existing thing doesn't work, right? If you can't like, you know, show your movies in the movie theater, then of course all your peers who are involved in this stuff will be like, oh yeah, tell me more about that 8mm film or the VCR or whatever. So I just assume that like where you have early web people and early sex work, you would just attract all the people who were both involved in sex work in some way and also super technical, and that would probably establish a kind of little localized eddy that would survive. In the same way you go to Waterloo and there's just all these people who are kind of descendants of Shopify who are themselves descendants of RIM, you know?
Cute.
Stripper News.
Stripper News.